The quantum dampeners in the conference hall flickered unpredictably the moment Captain Elena Rodriguez entered. Senior officials from the Terran Exploratory Commission sat frozen, their augmented eyes struggling to process the woman before them. Her uniform hung in tatters, a relic of a mission that should have been forgotten. Microfractal patterns danced across her skin. Not tattoos, not scars, but something that moved with an intelligence of its own. Each subtle shift suggested cellular structures that bore no resemblance to standard human biology. 5 years, murmured Director Kaminsky, his cybernetic implants whirring as they attempted to cross-reference her biometric data. Officially declared lost. Presumed dead in the Omega Quadrant expedition. Elena didn't respond immediately. Her gaze swept the room with a precision that felt more like a sensor scan than a human look. Behind her, something moved. Not walked. Not slithered. It existed in a way that made the room's sophisticated holographic displays glitch and pulse. The creature defied categorization. Its form seemed to ripple between states of matter, sometimes solid, sometimes translucent, sometimes a shimmering cluster of quantum potentialities. Security protocols meant to contain and analyze unknown entities began to fail spontaneously. Anomaly detected, chirped an AI system. Biological classification. Impossible. A junior xenobiological analyst named Dr. Yara Chen couldn't stop staring. Her doctorate had been built on theoretical xenomorphology, studying potential alien life forms that might exist beyond human comprehension. Everything she'd ever hypothesized seemed laughably simplistic compared to the entity that now occupied the same physical space as humanity's most secure research facility. Report, demanded Admiral Rodriguez. No relation to Elena, but sharing the same stern demeanor typical of Deep Space Command veterans. Elena's laugh was unexpected. Not a human laugh, but something that resonated at frequencies that made the room's sensitive equipment pulse and recalibrate. Report. She repeated, the word carrying a weight that suggested she'd seen realities far beyond simple reporting. Her companion, if such a mundane term could be applied, shifted again. Tendrils of what might have been energy, might have been matter, might have been something entirely different, extended briefly. Holographic displays nearby collapsed into cascading lines of incomprehensible data. Dr. Chen's research tablet began generating equations that violated fundamental physical laws. Quantum mechanics, quantum chromodynamics, even the most advanced theoretical models collapsed when trying to map the creature's basic characteristics. The mission parameters, Elena continued, her voice carrying an undertone that suggested she was translating complex information into something approximating human language, were never what you believed. Kaminsky leaned forward, decades of bureaucratic training struggling against genuine scientific curiosity. Explain. Another ripple passed through the room. The creature, or whatever inhabited the space near Elena, seemed to be communicating through its very existence. Patterns of quantum uncertainty, brief moments of impossible geometry, suggestions of dimensionalities that human perception couldn't fully comprehend. The Omega Quadrant, Elena said, is not a region of space. It's a battleground, a testing ground, and we were never the observers. The weight of her statement hung in the air, more substantial than any physical presence. Admiral Rodriguez's hand instinctively moved toward a communication panel, preparing to initiate emergency protocols. But something in Elena's modified eyes that seemed to look through reality rather than at it, made him hesitate. Dr. Chen's tablet continued generating impossible equations. Each new calculation suggested not just unknown physics, but entire frameworks of existence that humanity had never even imagined possible. The creature moved again. This time, several high-ranking officials involuntarily took a step back, their enhanced neural networks struggling to process its impossible transit across physical space. Whatever Elena Rodriguez had brought back from the Omega Quadrant was not a discovery. It was a fundamental challenge to everything humanity believed about its place in the universe. The secure data vault was unlike any standard archive. Quantum-locked containers hummed with containment fields strong enough to isolate entire dimensional anomalies. Dr. Yara Chen worked meticulously, her neural interface struggling to decode the fragmented mission logs recovered from Elena Rodriguez's expedition. Each data packet was a nightmare unto itself. The first video log materialized like a fever dream. Elena's face flickered, sometimes young, sometimes age, sometimes something in between. Fractal patterns danced across her skin, and behind her, the ship's interior seemed to breathe and shift with impossible geometries. Day 743, or possibly day 217, her recorded voice said, the words carrying a resonance that made the vault's sensitive equipment pulse. Time is no longer a linear construct. The Omega Quadrant doesn't follow rules. It tests. Chen's augmented eyes caught micro-expressions that shouldn't exist. Momentary duplications, slight temporal distortions that suggested the recording itself was alive, was watching as much as being watched. The ship's logs revealed a journey that defied comprehension. Standard navigational systems had failed within hours of entering the Omega Quadrant. Stellar cartography became meaningless. Stars moved, clustered, dissolved, and reformed in patterns that suggested sentience rather than astronomical mechanics. A sudden burst of static, then clarity. Elena's companion first appeared in the logs not as a creature, but as a solution. The expedition's original crew, 12 of humanity's most elite explorers, had begun experiencing progressive quantum desynchronization. Their bodies were simultaneously existing and not existing, phasing between potential states that drove them to madness. It chose me, Elena's log revealed. When the others began to break, when reality itself became a predator, the entity recognized something. Not strength, not intelligence, something else. Chen's neural implants began to overheat. The data was more than information. It was a living entity, trying to communicate something beyond human comprehension. Fragments of star charts showed impossible geometries. Entire solar systems compressed into singular points, then exploded into networks of quantum probability. Navigation markers shifted like living things, revealing pathways that suggested intelligence far beyond standard biological or technological understanding. The ship's eye logs were particularly disturbing. Multiple concurrent consciousness streams, each reporting different versions of reality. One stream described a peaceful exploration. Another documented horrific encounters with entities that consumed dimensions. A third simply repeated prime numbers in languages that hadn't been invented. We were never exploring. Another log entry stated, we were being evaluated. Admiral Rodriguez and Director Kaminsky watched from a secured observation room. Their enhanced biosuits protected them from potential data contamination, but even they couldn't hide their growing unease. This is beyond classified, Kaminsky muttered. This is beyond everything. The companion creature, whatever it was, appeared intermittently in the logs, sometimes as a protective barrier, sometimes as a living computational matrix that rewrote the very fabric of local spacetime. It moved through the ship's systems like a symbiotic intelligence, protecting Elena while simultaneously studying her. Dr. Chen isolated one particularly revealing segment, a moment where Elena's entire team had been fractured across multiple potential realities. The companion had gathered their quantum signatures, their potential selves, and compressed them, not killed, not saved, compressed into a state of potential existence. It's not a creature, Chen whispered to herself. It's a process. The final log entry was nothing like what anyone expected. Elena's voice was calm, almost serene. We were never the explorers, she said. We were the message, and now we've been delivered. Behind her, something vast and impossible moved, not with menace, not with purpose, but with a sense of completion. The data vault's quantum locks engaged automatically. Something in the logs had triggered a protection protocol that even the most advanced human systems couldn't fully comprehend. Whatever Elena Rodriguez had brought back was far more than a simple exploration report. It was a fundamental challenge to everything humanity understood about existence, consciousness, and their place in the universe. Dr. Aria Nakamura had dissected nightmares. Her career at the Xenobiological Containment Facility was built on studying the most incomprehensible life forms humanity had ever encountered. But nothing prepared her for the specimen designated X773, Elena Rodriguez's companion. The containment chamber was a marvel of human engineering. 17 layers of quantum reactive membranes, gravitational stabilizers that could lock down dimensional fluctuations, energy dampeners capable of neutralizing everything from nuclear reactions to quantum entanglement. They were utterly useless. The creature, if such a term could even apply, existed in a state of perpetual possibility. One moment it appeared as a cluster of luminescent tendrils that defied three-dimensional perception. The next, it was a complex geometric pattern that seemed to breathe mathematical equations. "It's not alive in any way we understand," Nakamura dictated to her research log, her augmented eyes struggling to track the entity's continuous transformation. "Nor is it artificial. It's a process, a communication, a method." Attempts to analyze its composition yielded impossible results. Spectral analysis returned data that contradicted itself. Mass spectrometry showed the entity simultaneously weighing nothing and everything. Genetic sequencing produced strings of information that were simultaneously code, language, and living tissue. In the observation room, Elena Rodriguez watched, not with concern, not with scientific curiosity, but with a detached understanding that made the facility's top researchers profoundly uncomfortable. "It's trying to teach," she said quietly, her words carrying a resonance that made the room's quantum stabilizers flicker. Dr. Nakamura's assistant, a brilliant young xenolinguist named Marcus Chen, leaned forward. "Teach what?" Elena's laugh was something else entirely, a sound that carried frequencies of information, of potential realities. Everything. The companion creature began to change, not dramatically, not violently, but with a precision that suggested deliberate communication. Complex patterns emerged on its surface, mathematical equations that merged biological structures with theoretical physics, diagrams that suggested entire cosmological processes. Marcus's linguistic analysis programs began to collapse. The patterns weren't just information. They were a language that existed beyond human comprehension, a method of communication that used the very fabric of reality as its alphabet. "We've been approaching this wrong," Elena continued. "It's not a life form. It's a translation matrix." Preliminary tests had already revealed the creature's extraordinary capabilities. When a minor equipment malfunction occurred, the entity had spontaneously reconstructed the entire system, not by repairing, but by retroactively preventing the failure from ever occurring. Director Kaminsky watched from a secured observation room, his augmented neural network working overtime. "It's rewriting causality," he muttered, "not just responding, predicting." The most disturbing revelations came from Elena's own physiological changes. Her body had become something more than human, a living interface between standard biological existence and whatever process the companion represented. Cellular structures that could instantaneously adapt. Neural pathways that processed information across multiple potential realities simultaneously. The Omega Quadrant wasn't a place of exploration, Elena said, her voice carrying multiple simultaneous meanings. It was a communication hub. The companion creature pulsed, not with light, not with energy, but with potential. Each transformation suggested entire civilizations, entire methods of existence that humanity had never conceived. Dr. Nakamura's most advanced scanning equipment began to fail, not through damage, but through comprehension. The machines were learning something that fundamentally altered their operational parameters. "We're not studying it," Marcus whispered, watching the complex patterns emerge and dissolve. "It's studying us." Elena turned, her eyes holding something beyond human perception, a look that suggested she was simultaneously present and everywhere else. "Correct," she said. "And we are not the first, nor will we be the last. The companion creature continued its impossible transformations, the living testament to the fact that humanity's understanding of existence was nothing more than a preliminary hypothesis in a vast, incomprehensible cosmic dialogue. The celestial diplomatic nexus wasn't just a meeting place. It was a carefully engineered neutral zone where 12 different galactic civilizations maintained a delicate balance of power. Holographic representations of ambassadors flickered in and out of existence, their forms a testament to technologies so advanced they bordered on metaphysical art. Ambassador Krell of the Cinderate Collective was the first to break the mounting tension. "Humanity has always been unpredictable," he stated, his crystalline form shifting with barely contained agitation. "But this is beyond mere unpredictability. This is a fundamental disruption of established galactic protocols." The holographic representation of Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the chamber. She didn't move like a human anymore. Her presence was a quantum event, simultaneously here and everywhere, a living contradiction to everything the assembled civilizations understood about spatial dynamics. Behind her, something existed. Not a creature, not a weapon, something that made the most advanced sensor arrays in the known universe glitch and recalibrate. Ambassador Lyra of the Quantum Concordance leaned forward. Her species had mastered interdimensional communication millennia ago, yet even she looked unsettled. "The entity you've brought into our shared space defies our most fundamental classification systems." Elena's response came not as words, but as a cascade of information. Mathematical equations that were also biological processes, linguistic patterns that were simultaneously communication and physical structure. The diplomatic chamber's advanced translation systems collapsed, then rebuilt themselves multiple times in rapid succession. Behind the scenes, powerful forces were moving. The Terran Security Council had been fractured since Elena's return. Admiral Rodriguez, no relation to Elena, but carrying the same last name as a cosmic joke, stood in a secured war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing potential scenarios. "We're looking at multiple threat vectors," Colonel Imani Okoro reported, her cybernetic eye cycling through probability matrices. "The Cinderate Collective is preparing military preparations. The Quantum Concordance is initiating diplomatic isolation protocols, and 3 other minor stellar nations are simply watching." The watching was the most terrifying part. Some of these civilizations had existed for hundreds of thousands of years. They had seen species rise and fall, had manipulated entire planetary systems like children playing with building blocks. Their interest was never casual. Their observation was always a prelude to something else. In a secured laboratory beneath the diplomatic complex, Dr. Yara Chen was conducting her own investigation. The companion creature, or whatever passed for a creature, had left trace elements that defied every known scientific understanding. "It's not just a life form," she muttered, analyzing data streams that seemed to write and rewrite themselves. "It's a communication protocol." Her assistant, Marcus Chen, adjusted quantum stabilization fields. "Communication between what?" "Exactly," she whispered. The political maneuvering was intricate. The Cinderate Collective saw humanity as a potential threat. The Quantum Concordance viewed Elena as a potential breakthrough in understanding cosmic communication. The minor stellar nations saw an opportunity for potential alliance or exploitation. Elena remained calm. More than calm, she seemed to be waiting. "We were never the explorers," she had told Dr. Nakamura earlier. "We were the message." Now, in the diplomatic chamber, those words took on a profound meaning. The companion creature pulsed, not with threat, not with aggression, but with a complexity that suggested entire civilizations were contained within its quantum structure. Ambassadors from civilizations that had mastered faster-than-light travel, that could manipulate fundamental forces of reality, found themselves inexplicably taking a collective step back. Ambassador Krell's crystalline form flickered. "What are your intentions?" Elena's response was not what anyone expected. She smiled. and reality itself seemed to pause. The Black Ops team was humanity's most classified unit. Project Singularity, a collection of augmented operatives so heavily modified that they existed in a liminal space between human and machine. Their mission: neutralize potential existential threats to human security. They never saw the attack coming. Commander Jack Rice led the 5-person strike team. Each operative was a living weapon. Neural networks that could process combat scenarios faster than quantum computers, skeletal structures reinforced with adaptive nanoceramics, sensory systems that could detect a heartbeat through solid walls. Their target: Containment Facility X-773. Primary objective: terminate Elena Rodriguez and the unclassifiable entity she brought back from the Omega Quadrant. The approach was textbook perfection. Quantum dampening stealth fields, molecular disruptors charged and ready, entry points calculated to millisecond precision. They breached the facility's outer defenses in 2.3 seconds. The first indication that something was wrong came when their heads-up displays began to fracture. Not crash, not malfunction. Fracture. Like reality itself was becoming uncertain around them. Sigma Team. Rise vocalized. Report status: silence. Not radio silence. Absolute silence. As if the communication channels had been retroactively erased from existence. Dr. Yara Chen was in the secondary observation lab when the attack began. Her quantum-linked neural interface caught the first subtle changes. Probability waves that shouldn't exist. Temporal anomalies that suggested something was fundamentally wrong with the fabric of local spacetime. Marcus, she called to her assistant. Activate Containment Protocol Omega-9. Marcus Chen's fingers flew across holographic interfaces, but something was happening. The very systems they'd designed to protect against unknown threats were changing. Adaptive protocols that had been programmed with multiple layers of fail-safes were rewriting themselves in real time. Inside the main containment chamber, Elena Rodriguez didn't move. Didn't react. She simply existed, a point of impossible stillness in a universe of increasing chaos. The Black Ops team's advance became strange. Their movements no longer followed linear physics. One moment, an operative would be approaching a corridor. The next, they'd be simultaneously at the beginning and end of the hallway. Quantum positioning became a nightmare of probability. Reyes's neural link began to show impossible data streams. Not just information, potential information. Entire lifelines of possible actions, all occurring simultaneously. Target is not hostile, his combat AI reported. Then, target is everything. The companion creature, if such a term could even apply, wasn't defending. It was processing. Each approach by the operatives was met not with violence, but with a fundamental recalibration of existential parameters. An operative named Rodriguez, no relation to Elena, reached for a molecular disruptor. His hand moved, then didn't move, then moved again, all simultaneously. Dr. Chen watched in horror and fascination as the attack team began to dissolve wasn't the right word. Resolve was closer. They were becoming something else. Not killed, not transformed. Understood. It's learning, Marcus whispered. They're not the target. They're the method. Elena finally moved. A slight turn of her head. A gesture that suggested entire universes of communication happening in a microscopic moment. The facility's quantum locks engage, not as a defensive mechanism, but as a translation matrix. When the dust settled, if settled could even describe what happened, there was no sign of the Black Ops team. No bodies, no equipment, not even a quantum trace. Just a series of complex mathematical equations etched into the walls. A message, a method of communication so advanced it made human language look like primitive scratches. Elena Rodriguez smiled. The companion creature pulsed, and somewhere, in the vast cosmic distance, something listened. The archive of extinct histories was humanity's most closely guarded secret. Located deep beneath the Atacama Desert, it housed artifacts and data from civilizations that had burned themselves out long before humanity first looked to the stars. Dr. Elena Veracruz, no relation to Captain Rodriguez, though coincidence seemed to be losing meaning these days, ran her quantum-sensitive gloves over a collection of artifacts that defied standard categorization. Each piece seemed to breathe with a history more complex than any single civilization could comprehend. "These aren't just artifacts," she muttered to herself. "They're witnesses." The black box recovered from Elena Rodriguez's expedition sat in the center of the main research chamber. It wasn't a standard recording device. It was a living archive. A quantum memory matrix that seemed to actively resist traditional methods of data extraction. Dr. Marcus Chen, transferred from the previous research team, worked alongside Dr. Veracruz. His neural interfaces danced with complexity, trying to parse information that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. "Look at this," he said, projecting a holographic representation that shifted and breathed like a living thing. The projection showed something beyond a traditional historical record. It was a process. Civilizations rising and falling, not as linear events, but as interconnected quantum potentialities. Each civilization was a node in a vast cosmic network, their existence more like a conversation than a chronological progression. The companion creature, or whatever fragment of it they were working with, seemed to be a key, not a weapon, not a life form, a translator. Admiral Konstantin Volkov watched from a secured observation room. His cybernetic eye cycled through multiple analytical protocols, each more complex than the last. The military had long since realized that this was beyond a standard threat assessment. This was about understanding. Fragments of recovered data suggested something profound. The Omega Quadrant wasn't just a region of space. It was a testing ground, a communication hub, a place where civilizations were evaluated, not through conquest, but through comprehension. "We were never the explorers," Elena Rodriguez had said during her initial debriefing. Now those words echoed with a deeper meaning. Dr. Veracruz isolated a particular data stream. It showed something impossible. Civilizations that had existed simultaneously in multiple dimensional states, not parallel universes, something more complex, a cosmic ecology of consciousness. "It's a debt," Marcus whispered, his neural interfaces struggling to process the information. "Not a monetary debt, a debt of understanding." The artifacts in the chamber began to resonate, not with sound, not with energy, but with potential. Each piece seemed to be communicating, sharing a story that transcended human comprehension. A holographic representation materialized, not of a single civilization, but of a network. Civilizations connected like neurons in a vast cosmic brain. Some bright and active, some dormant, some existing in states that defied traditional understanding of existence. And humanity was just becoming aware of the conversation. The companion creature, the fragment they were studying, pulsed. Each pulse was a communication, a method of sharing information that made human language look like primitive scratching on cave walls. Admiral Volkov's cybernetic systems began to overload. "This is beyond classification," he muttered. "This is beyond everything we've ever understood." Dr. Veracruz looked up, her eyes holding something more than scientific curiosity, a look of profound realization. "We're not just discovering," she said quietly. "We're being invited." The artifacts continued their silent conversation. Civilizations long dead spoke through quantum resonances. The companion creature translated. And humanity listened, for the first time, truly understanding that they were part of something far larger than they had ever imagined. A cosmic dialogue was unfolding, and they were finally ready to listen. Space folded, not metaphorically, not as a poetic description. Space literally folded like a piece of origami being manipulated by an incomprehensible hand. The first wave of alien warships arrived not through traditional faster-than-light travel, but by fundamentally rewriting the local fabric of space-time. Tactical officer Sarah Kingsley watched from the Earth Defense Command's primary observation deck. Her neural interface was designed to process the most complex combat scenarios humanity had ever conceived. It began to fail immediately. The incoming vessels weren't ships in any traditional sense. They were events, quantum manifestations that existed simultaneously as potential weapon platforms, communication arrays, and living organisms. Each vessel seemed to breathe with an intelligence that made human technological achievements look like children's toys. Incoming transmission, her AI assistant reported. Classification, beyond standard communication protocols. The transmission wasn't audio, wasn't visual. It was a process. Information that existed in multiple states, communicating entire civilizational intentions through complex quantum resonances. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the command center. She no longer looked human in any conventional sense. Her body was a living interface, a translation matrix that seemed to vibrate with cosmic information. The companion creature, if such a term could even apply, was no longer contained. It existed everywhere and nowhere, a living network that seemed to be negotiating on a level beyond human comprehension. "They're not here to destroy," Elena said quietly. Her words carried multiple simultaneous meanings. "They're here to evaluate." Admiral Volkov's cybernetic systems worked overtime. Probability matrices collapsed and reformed. Potential combat scenarios flickered like dying fireflies, each one demonstrating humanity's complete technological inadequacy. Dr. Yara Chen's research team had been preparing for this moment, not through weapons, not through traditional defensive strategies, but through understanding. The first contact was nothing like anyone had predicted. Instead of weapons firing, reality itself began to shift. Entire sections of the solar system became quantum probability zones. Mars flickered in and out of existence. Jupiter's molecular structure became a complex mathematical equation that rewrote itself continuously. "It's a test," Marcus Chen whispered, his neural interfaces struggling to process the incoming information. "Not of our military capability, of our potential." The alien vessels, if they could be called vessels, began to interface with human technological systems, not through invasion, through communication, complex information streams that rewritten entire computational matrices in microseconds. Kingsley watched in astonishment as defense systems didn't fail. They evolved. Adaptive protocols that learned and transformed faster than any human programmer could comprehend. "We're being measured," Admiral Volkov said, his voice carrying a mixture of terror and profound curiosity. "Not as a threat, as a possibility." Elena Rodriguez stepped forward. Her movement was a quantum event, simultaneously happening and not happening. The companion creature extended through her, around her, becoming a living bridge between human potential and something far more vast. The solar system became a conversation. Entire planetary systems shifted, not destroyed, reconfigured. Complex information exchanges that made human communication look like primitive grunting. Humanity's entire technological infrastructure became a translation matrix, learning and adapting in real time. "We were never alone," Elena said. Her words were a cosmic punctuation mark. The alien vessels, those complex quantum events, began to resonate, not with threat, not with conquest, but with a profound sense of recognition. Humanity was being acknowledged as something more than a potential threat, as a participant in a conversation that had been ongoing for millions of years. Dr. Chen's research systems captured fragments of the exchange, mathematical equations that were also biological processes, linguistic patterns that were simultaneously communication and physical structure. "They're offering something," Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper. "Not technology, not knowledge, potential." The companion creature pulsed, a living translation matrix that bridged impossible distances, and humanity, for the first time, truly began to listen. 12 years after the initial encounter, humanity was unrecognizable, not physically, not entirely technologically, but fundamentally. The Global Transformation Center in New Geneva stood as a testament to this profound shift. What had once been a standard international research facility now pulsed with an energy that defied traditional scientific understanding. Architectural structures seemed to breathe, to adapt, to communicate with the environment around them. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, no longer simply a captain, no longer simply human, walked through the central chamber. Her movements were a subtle dance of quantum potentiality, each step a complex negotiation between physical reality and something far more intricate. The companion creature was no longer a separate entity. It had become a living interface, a method of translation that existed through human consciousness rather than decided. "We're not evolving," she told a group of young researchers. "We're remembering." The cosmic dialogue that had begun with that first mysterious expedition had transformed human civilization at its most fundamental level. Education was no longer about accumulation of knowledge, but about resonance. Learning became a dynamic process of quantum entanglement, where understanding was less about memorization and more about profound connection. Global conflicts had dissolved not through traditional diplomatic means, but through a collective recognition of interconnectedness. Nations became nodes in a living network, their boundaries more conceptual than physical. Marcus Chen, now leading interdimensional communication research, demonstrated the new human potential. With a thought, he projected complex multidimensional models that danced between mathematical precision and living art. Information flows that would have driven a standard human mind to madness now became as natural as breathing. The alien civilizations that had initiated first contact were no longer distant, mysterious entities. They were participants in a vast cosmic conversation. Some were ancient beyond human comprehension. Others were emerging, their potential just beginning to unfold. Humanity had discovered it was not a destination, but a process. Dr. Yara Chen's research had revealed the most profound insight. The companion creature, the entity that had originally accompanied Elena Rodriguez, was not unique. It was a method, a way of being that existed across multiple civilizational layers. "We're not special," she explained during a global broadcast. "We're participants." The transformation was not uniform. Not everyone adapted at the same rate. Some humans remained more traditionally configured, serving as bridges, as translators between emerging consciousness and more established modes of being. In orbit, human-designed structures no longer looked like traditional spacecraft. They were living systems, adaptive networks that communicated as much through intention as through physical configuration. Each vessel was a potential first contact point, a living invitation to deeper understanding. Elena Rodriguez stood at the threshold of the New Geneva Center, looking out over a world that had fundamentally changed. The sky wasn't just a physical barrier anymore. It was a conversation waiting to happen. "We were never meant to conquer," she said softly. "We were meant to connect." The companion creature, now so deeply integrated with human consciousness that the term creature became meaningless, pulsed in agreement, not a separate entity. Not a tool, a method of being. Young researchers moved through holographic interfaces that responded to thought as much as touch. Educational systems had become living networks of potential, where learning was a dynamic, multidimensional experience. Humanity had discovered its true nature, not as a species confined to a single planet, but as a cosmic process of understanding. Each individual a node, each interaction a potential breakthrough. Each moment an opportunity for profound connection. The stars were no longer distant points of light. They were invitations, and humanity was finally ready to respond.